Here from Georgetown University, and he's going to talk to us about self-positioning as gay sons in Indian immigrant coming out stories.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming out here. I'm gay, I'm Ping from Georgetown University. So today we're looking at the positioning in gay immigrants coming out stories. Yes, and during the presentation, please feel free to take pictures and live tweets. I like to see myself on Twitter. So that was just an example to show you that coming out rarely happens in a random and casual way. Usually it is socially motivated. There's a reason for coming out as LGBTQ and so on. But what is that reason? Why do people come out? Before I came to the US, I didn't feel the need to come out to my parents in Taiwan. Apparently that has changed. So to answer this question, I find this quote helpful. So Rust suggests that we reconceptualize coming out as an ongoing dynamic process of describing one's social location within a changing social context. So for gay immigrants, this changing social context is twofold. Is leaving the heterosexual normativity and claiming one's gay identity, and leaving one's home country and moving to a new one. So there has been a lot of research done on coming out or using coming out stories as a methodology, and there has been having a lot of benefits as suggested in these studies. For example, looking at family reaction, Denise and Afifi write that parents may assume their child is heterosexual and envision a life for the child that corresponds with that assumption. So there's this need to come out in order to deny, to reject that heterosexual assumption. And D'Amico and others point out that positive reaction from important others allow youth to put a name to and normalize what they're experiencing, whereas negative reaction intensify the questioning and anxiety experienced by youth. Also, a study at the University of Montreal shows that lesbian, gays, and bisexuals who are out to others have lower stress hormone levels and fewer symptoms of anxiety, depression, and burnout. And more related to the internet, a new technology, both Gray's and Craig and McEnroy's studies show how coming out can be facilitated in online spaces by looking at the online representation, and also how the role of new media plays in one's coming out process. But as you can see, a lot of the discussion within academia has remained within this Western society. So I began to wonder, as a gay immigrant, what coming out is like, what it means to other gay immigrants in the US. So I asked my participants to tell me their coming out experiences. And 4 out of 7 participants in my study are from India. So for my master's thesis, I decided to focus on their interviews with them. And in today's presentation, I will show examples from 3 of their stories. And as you can see, even though they're from India, they are by no means a homogeneous bunch. There's the age difference, and they are from different places in India. They speak different languages. They now live in different places in the greater Washington, D.C. area. And their time spent in the US varies as well. But there are 2 themes that I found across these interviews: the close social network in India and the great values placed on marriage. These are the recurring and repeating themes that are recounted in their coming out experiences. The former is considered to be an obstacle that obstructs coming out in India, whereas the latter is used as a cultural touchstone meaning that by resisting heterosexual marriage, they get to reaffirm their gay identity. My analysis is built on the 3 levels of narrative positioning proposed by Bamberg in 1997. So the first level, level 1 positioning, is where storytellers position the story characters with each other within the story world, inside the story. Level 2's positioning deals with the interaction in the storytelling activity between the storyteller and the story recipient. And lastly, level 3 positioning has to do with the cultural background. So how storytellers position themselves in a broader social context. So we will look at the positioning at different levels when they tell their coming out stories. So in the first example, we will see wherein's reflection of fitting himself into the traditional Indian values of heterosexual marriage. There's a plot twist, as you will see shortly. And the ending points to the fact that societal pressure of getting married plays an indispensable role in his cultural background. So he says, and it's funny, when I first came to this, I was thinking, oh, I will at some point go back home and marry a girl or something. And so there was this friend of mine who I met online those days. There was no Grindr. It was some website called get.com. So as you can see from the very beginning of the story, he provides a commentary, an evaluation to set the humorous tone, so you can kind of expect what's going to happen. And then where I put the arrow, you can see that he voices his inner thought back then, saying that at some point he will go back to India after he finishes his master's education in the US, and then subject himself to the heterosexual assumption and heteronormativity by marrying a woman. But at the same time, you can see he is and he was fully aware of his same-sex attraction by displaying behavior of meeting other gay men and visiting gay.com. So there's this discrepancy, a break between how he felt back then and what he planned to do back then. And so I met this guy, and then we became friends. And then I told him at some point I would get married. And then, and he was so mad at me. Oh, you can do that. It's not fair to the girl because you know you were gay and you will ruin her life. And the whole period going on like a month, him harassing me. After a couple of years later, he actually ended up marrying a girl. I found that he is married to a girl now, so it's easier said than done. So there is this plot twist, almost like a role reversal. Someone who holds an opposite opinion actually did the opposite thing. So Ryansh was the person who thought he was going to marry a woman, but in the end, by positioning himself in contrast to this person, this story character at level 1, he gets to make his gay identity even more pronounced. So at level 1, within the story, you can see that he sets up this opposition between himself and the story character as having different opposing beliefs that if you're gay, you shouldn't marry a woman. And then you can see that he, again, voices the other story characters with all these ideas that, being gay shouldn't do that. And then the final twist shows that this once again reinforces the idea that what pressured him at first to marry a woman is real, even though he did pull it off by not marrying a woman and claimed himself to be an openly out gay man, the other person didn't. And therefore, you can see at level 3, this broader social context, both him, Ryansh, and the other story characters are positioned inside this idea that heterosexual marriage is so important. It's even difficult, even hard for a gay man to say no to marrying a woman. Then, continuing this first excerpt, Ranch ends the previous story of his online encounter with another gay man and proceeds to make comments on the social context. In telling a generic narrative in present tense, he makes commonplace the way people in India inquire about his marital status or his plan to get married. For Asia, you always think, but there's so much pressure from family. Then I would, I try to resist the pressure from my family, and every time I go, my mom go to India. My mom would ask the same question, when are you getting married? And I'm sure you know this too. In India, not just your immediate family that is always asking, this is your business when you're getting married. So here, he kind of sets aside the story and focus on the level 2, the interaction part of the storytelling, by addressing me directly, especially in the third arrow. You can see a telling me, this you meaning the story recipient. I'm sure you know this too. So you can see that kind of corresponding to the beginning of this excerpt for Asia. So because he knows that I'm from Taiwan, from Asia, so he kind of builds this affiliation that you must know this too. Like there's so much pressure coming from the family, and from there he addresses this pressure. And especially by being asked the question, when are you getting married? And then from there, he goes on to talk about that his personal business, being married or not, is actually not just a private affair. So here he says, it's everybody that you know of who has nothing to do with your life, or your neighbors, people who work at your home, random people on the street. They're always curious as to why or when you're getting married. I mean, like somebody in the neighborhood, who has nothing to do with, am I right? Why are you not getting married? Like, it's none of your business. So here at level 1, inside the story, he positioned himself in relation to so many different story characters, including neighbors, people working at his home, even random people on the street. So he's kind of exaggerating here, but the point is to situate himself as gay Indian man inside an Indian society, to really accentuate the circumstances that he was under, to show how much pressure he had. So you can see that this is the part of his where his Indian identity intersect with his gay identity, but at the same time they also contradict each other in a way that they are not exactly compatible. So in telling his coming out story, he kind of reaffirms that by being in the U.S., he gets to leave that behind. And this can also be seen in another participant's story. So here we will see that in recounting Pranav his coming out experience to his lab mate from Taiwan, Pranav also mentions this question about getting married and even suspends the story to explain to me what it is like for Indian men to be expected to get married. So this is only a short excerpt before he actually tells his coming out story, but it goes to show how much expectation, how much he's expected to marry a woman. So he was like, he meaning his lab mate, and started chatting with me. He was like, oh Pranav, when are you going to marry? Again, the same question. Like because that's what Indians do after doing their masters. They will find a job and get married and live happily ever after. So this part, the second arrow, is where Pranav suspends the story and focus on the interaction, storytelling interaction, and explains to me. This is kind of like a different example you just saw from the last excerpt. In this case, Pranav doesn't feel that affiliation like, hey, you're also one of the insiders, an Asian, but instead he explains to me as to an outsider who is not an Indian that this is what Indian men do. But what's interesting here is that you can see the way he used the pronouns and the way he describes what Indians do after their masters. He doesn't include himself as part of those Indians. So kind of distancing himself from the heterosexual assumption. And lastly, we will see Arjun tells a story of another gay man coming out to him to make a contrast and present himself as an openly gay man who is out and honest, resisting the heteronormativity of traditional marriage in India. So, and some people I know who are gay made a conscious choice not to come out, and they carry on, their compartmentalized life. Got married, had kids, and I assume that they still have their affairs. In fact, one of them came out to me, so it was like a couple of years ago. Back when I was not trying to actively hide or anything or come out then. So here you can see Arjun present himself as someone who does not hide his gay identity. But me, as a story recipient, on the other hand, is positioned as someone who witnesses his forthrightness and openness when it comes to coming out to people with whom he is acquainted. And positioning himself in a broader cultural landscape, Arjun refers to two dominant discourses. The first one is, again, this important role of marriage in India, but the second one is being out means being honest, and not being out or being closeted means hiding. So I would get this question like, why are you not married? Why are you not married? And this quick repetition showing how frequent it is. And at some point, if it's not a close person, I used to laugh it off, no answer. But if you know the person, then there's no point in hiding. And I would tell them, I'm not married because I'm gay. So kind of answering his, responding to earlier point that he's positioning himself as an open, out gay man in India, an Indian man in the US. And before we go on to the next part of the excerpt, it's necessary to note Goffman's idea on passing. So in describing and explaining stigma, social stigma, Goffman notes that a stigmatized person must necessarily pay a great psychological price, a very high level of anxiety in living a life that can be collapsed at any moment. And the passer will feel torn between two attachments. This kind of goes back to the study that we just saw about one's mental health, being out or not. And this also shows in the next excerpt. So Arjun begins by voicing the other story character. So my folks pressured me into getting married, and I could not resist it, and I got married. I don't buy that anymore. I mean, I can see that happening. So, but then, I guess he has his affairs side to side and has kids. It worked for him, but you can see he's torn up about it, corresponding to Goffman's observation and description of a passer and passing as straight. If it works for someone, good for them, but I knew it would not be something that I could think of doing. In fact, my mom, when I eventually came out to them many years later, she was like, "That's fine, you're gay. Can you still get married?" And then he kind of goes back to him speaking for himself. Ruining some girl's life? It's not like that. And you can see, again, the recurring just within these excerpts, how frequent these questions appear, including when are you getting married, why are you not getting married, and also the idea of ruining some girl's life that we just saw in Rayan's account. So here, at level 1 in the story world, he presents this societal pressure and also provides his evaluation by stressing I don't buy that anymore. So again, articulating that I am gay, and if someone is gay, that should be the case too. And then Arjun creates this contrast by taking a step back, as he says that people in the past can kind of get by using this excuse, but not for people of this generation. And then reinforcing that the idea that, being gay, they should be honest and open. So to conclude, the first part is coming out is motivated by the pressure that arises from heterosexual assumptions imposed on the participants as they position themselves in a tight-knit family network and in relation to marriage for the participant in my study. And the strategy, this common strategy that I use is the separation between the storyteller and the story characters. This contributes to the creation of coherence of self, from going from, as we saw in the first example, going from I'm going to marry a woman to the eventual no, I'm not, and I accept myself as a gay man, and positioning level 1 inside the story and the construction of their gay identity, and also deals with the intersection between their Indian identity and their gay identity. And lastly, this study contributes to the understanding of how narratives are used to portray the identities of gay immigrants as participants position themselves vis-à-vis other story characters, and even in relation to the storyteller, the researcher, which is me. Thank you.
Thank you. Great, thank
So,
you.
The next speaker, right?
Yeah, we'll hold